Hi and welcome. Thanks for watching. Today we're going to talk about Christian denominations. There are millions of YouTube videos on Christian denominations, but all of those videos just tend to make comparisons or analyse the differences between each denomination. That's all good. There's nothing wrong with that. But my intention of this video here is to try and dig in a little bit deeper. So where do all of the denominations come from in Christianity? Why is there so many denominations? Most importantly, which one is right? Are they all right? Are any of them right? In my view, this is a pretty important issue. It is a big question, and it's not necessarily easy to find the right answer. Every church falls under one denomination or another. Even the non-denominational churches are a denomination. So if you're a new Christian, or if you're thinking about going to church because you want to get to know God, which one do you actually go to? On the other hand, you might have been going to church for years already. Perhaps you might already be part of a congregation. You may already have your own church. You might be a pastor or a priest. But in any case, I think this is a very important video, so let's dig down. So today there are more than 30,000 Christian denominations in existence. With that in mind, it's definitely not hard to get confused. So let's look at some history. There were many denominations among ancient Israelites that existed during the Old Testament times. There were various differences in beliefs among those 12 tribes of Israel. There were differences in belief even among the Jews. Just if you're new to Christianity, the Old Testament is the first half of the Bible. It was written for Israel or for the Hebrews, or the 12 tribes of Israel. These 12 tribes were fathered by someone called Jacob. So really what we're going to do is a comparison between the denominations that existed in the Old Testament, pre-Christianity, and we're going to compare it to the denominations that exist in the present day, just to see if we can find any similarities. Before we do get into that though, I'll just go through some really brief introductions just so we're clear on the characters that come up in this particular video. So all of these denominations, or sects as they were better known, they all believed in the Abrahamic God of the Pentateuch. All right? The Pentateuch is the first 5 books of the Old Testament, Genesis through to Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers and Deuteronomy. So there's 5 books. So when we say Abrahamic, it refers to Abraham, who was Jacob's father. The God of the Bible is known as the God of Abraham, Isaac and Jacob. Just so we're clear on that one. Who was Jacob? Well, God named Jacob Israel. So Israel came about through Jacob. 12 tribes then formed through Jacob, and these tribes were then known as the children of Israel. They were all Hebrew, they all believed in the same God. They were all Israelites, but in those tribes, there was heaps of sects, heaps of denominations. And one of the most common coming out of these tribes was actually the Jews. The Jews, they claim lineage from 3 out of the 12 tribes. But don't forget there were actually 9 other tribes. The Jews themselves were predominantly from the tribe of Judah, which is where the term Jew actually derived. But some also say that they descended from the tribes of Benjamin and the tribe of Levi also. But among the Jewish community, there were 4 sects, and 4 of them all disagreed on various teachings relating to their religion and came about at different times. Those 4 Jewish sects, one of them was the Pharisees, another one was the Sadducees, the Essenes, and the Sicarii. It's important to understand that these terms were applied based on someone's belief system. They weren't necessarily born as Pharisees or Sadducees or any of that. They were born Hebrew from Israel and then followed these belief systems. So today there's Catholics, Orthodox, Protestants, Mormons, Baptists, Pentecostals, millions more. They're all made up of heaps of different people from all kinds of different backgrounds. But obviously with so many denominations, they have different opinions and interpretations. That being the case, they still fall under the Christian banner. You'd probably already be aware that Catholics, Orthodox, Baptists, it's a belief system. It's not a nationality. It's not something people are born into. So there's what we can see there is a parallel between what's happened in history and what's happening today. Now, and the difference being that the 12 tribes were really only of Hebrew nationality. They wouldn't be found anywhere else in the world, all deriving from the 12 tribes of Jacob, or from Israel. And Christians can tend to be of any nationality. So in the ancient times, the sects, the Pharisees, who were the Pharisees? Well, they were considered to be experts in the law. They weren't very spiritual people. They didn't believe in heaven. They didn't believe in hell or the spirit world. They were just working class people, and they were really connected to the community. The Sadducees, on the other hand, these guys are the top end of society. They were wealthy, well connected, lots of political power, believed in the spiritual aspect of the whole thing, but like the Pharisees, they were also very well versed in the law. Not only that, but they also saw themselves as experts at interpreting the law. This is really important because it sort of shows you where something came from here. When I say the law, I'm referring to the commandments that we know as the 10 commandments. That's the commandments that God gave to Moses on Mount Sinai, and we call it the Mosaic Law. Mosaic Law. That's where it comes from. So the Pharisees and the Sadducees were absolute experts, and they used to interpret that law. They disagreed on many aspects, but they wrote their own interpretation of the Mosaic Law, and these teachings were widely practiced as religion. These additions and interpretations that were written by the Pharisees and the Sadducees, interestingly, are separate from the Bible. I'm not sure whether that's widely understood. They're actually separate from the Bible, but that has been turned into what we now know as Judaism. The Essenes, another sect of the Jews, these guys were very ascetic, which means they isolated themselves from society. They're very religious, just like the Pharisees, big on self-discipline, very much attempting to live by the letter of the law. But they differed. The main difference in their belief to the Pharisees was that they didn't believe in the resurrection of the body, and the Pharisees were very much involved in society. The Essenes thought it was best for them to isolate. But another group was the Sicarii, the organised hitmen. They'd actually carry small daggers and turn up at events and terminate the Romans that were attempting to occupy the land of Jerusalem. The Sicarii, this actually comes from the word sikar, which means dagger. There was also Samaritans, who typically weren't even considered Jews, but in any case they were still children of Israel. They were descended from the 12 tribes. They called themselves Bnei Yisrael, which means children of Israel, and were descended from the Joseph tribes, which were Ephraim and Manasseh. But they were particularly despised by the Pharisees and Sadducees. They actually went out and built their own temple because they felt the Jews had it all wrong. I've just been through just a few of the different sects, denominations in the Old Testament, but these are the main ones that are referred to in the Bible, but there were a lot more. So there were various sects or denominations, opinions, beliefs that formed in Old Testament times, and obviously the same thing's happening today. There is some people now that fall in under the Christian banner and they call themselves non-denominational. It's still a denomination, even though they call it non-denominational. These churches, they're typically of of the Pentecostal sect. They just prefer not to identify as such. The Pentecostal sect's got a bit of a name for itself, but they are nearly always Pentecostal. In Christianity, the denominations have formed over the last 2,000 years, all made up of individuals that turn themselves into groups, and then those groups become organisations. You know, to give you a very broad idea, the Pentecostals, they believe in baptism of the Spirit, a thing called speaking in tongues. The Baptists do not believe that any of that applies today. The Orthodox think that they're the one true church. The Catholics think that they're the one true church. The Methodists think they don't conform to this world. The non-denominational people, well, they conform to the world. Just like in the Old Testament sects, the New Testament sects have many things in common, but vary in beliefs to different degrees, depending on what your comparing. But one thing's for sure, it goes on, and each of these denominations is sure that they're all right. So we've got a bit of an understanding as to where these denominations come from, how they're formed, both in the Old Testament times and again today. So the question becomes, which denomination is actually the right denomination? Does it even matter? Well, I'm going to use the example of the Apostle Paul. He was considered the apostle to the Gentiles. He was the writer of 13 books of the Bible. He wrote the books or the letters from Romans through to Philemon. That's in the New Testament. Paul was actually a Pharisee prior to being a Christian and writing these books. He was a Jew from the sect of the Pharisees. He was an expert in the law. He was a religious man, part of a sect, part of a denomination. And I can assure you this man, he knew everything about the law, everything about the Ten Commandments, the ordinances that were involved, the practices, interpretations, the whole lot. He was the ultimate religious person. His name was originally Saul, actually, which is a Hebrew name, but as Saul was later known as the apostle to the Gentiles, he became Paul. So before he was Paul, Saul is on a trip to Damascus. This is after Christ's resurrection. But Christ appeared to Saul as a bright light and asked, "Why are you persecuting me?" Saul was shocked. He's like, "What are you talking about? How am I persecuting God?" He thought he was doing the right thing by persecuting those children of Israel who actually believed that Jesus was the promised Messiah. To him, the whole idea of Jesus as a Messiah was absolute blasphemy. They'd actually kill people for believing such a thing. But according to the Bible, how wrong he was. And as a result of seeing this godly bright light right in front of his face, he was unable to see anything for a few days. He actually lost his sight for a few days. And it was at this point, this is when Saul's journey to find the truth actually begins. The man who thought he knew it all, considered with high regard throughout Israel, very high status and standing, yet he was completely confounded by God himself. Then God starts to spend a lot of time with Paul, revealing to him what he describes as the revelation of the mystery. It's called the revelation of the mystery, which is hidden since before the world began. But then this mystery was actually revealed to him, and as a result, he became Paul. He wrote this mystery down. It's in his 13 books, and these books are specifically written to every person who walks on this earth today. Before this mystery was actually revealed to Paul, the children of Israel, the Jews, believed that God would give salvation to them only, and the Gentiles would be excluded. This was obviously not the case. The key to understanding the answer to which denomination is correct is to understand the revelation of the mystery which is hidden since before the world began. Inside the mystery revelation given to Paul is what is called the gospel of the grace of God. The gospel of the grace of God, which I'm going to discuss probably in my next video, is the gospel that is made specifically for you. It is written to you, and it will set you free, it will bring you peace, and it will save you. Paul learnt this gospel pretty quickly, and his Pharisaic denomination affiliation faded to black. Everything that he thought he knew was wrong. Denomination, out the door. And what I really want to say here today is every denomination will always be wrong. The only truth is actually in that gospel of the grace of God. No denomination will save anyone. As you can see from history in the Old Testament, all the denominations and sects were wrong, and as a result, Israel missed out on their Messiah who came for them and was right there in front of them. No church will save anyone. Going to church will not save anyone. No denomination of churches I have ever come across emphasizes the raw truth that the only way to truly know God and experience the love and mercy of God is to understand and accept the gospel of the grace of God. So my next video will be on the gospel of the grace of God, the revelation of the mystery that was given to Paul. It's right there. It's not talked about. There is much talk about gospels in churches. Let's hope I can help you see exactly what the true gospel is so that you can be set free and at peace once and for all. The gospel of the grace of God is extremely important. We'll go through it so it's easy to follow and easy to understand. So feel free to come on this journey with me. Share this content with your friends, with your family. I've actually created this channel so that I can help to systematically remove the confusion and the division that actually exists in mainstream Christianity today. I'd love for you to understand how to read the Bible so it makes sense to you and anyone who wants to know. Once you read the Bible, you can understand it, and then you can confidently go out and bring joy, peace, and love of God to anyone who has ears to hear it. So subscribe to the channel. Feel free to like and comment below. Thanks. I really appreciate you watching.